I have only recently become aware of the Institute and the work it does in bringing people together and bringing them together in such a way that people of opposing viewpoints can actually meet and exchange ideas without an atmosphere of conflict. And I think it's a super idea, and I'm very pleased to be part of that, and that space is a part of that for this event. As Neil mentioned, this is a important anniversary in the history of space exploration because it is the 47th anniversary of the first satellite, which began the space age. Sputnik changed the entire world, and we're still in some ways looking back and feeling the effects of that event and the way that it completely changed our lives and our world. But today is also a historic day for something that happened today. And I'm sure you're all aware of this, which is that in the skies over the Mojave Desert this morning, a single pilot piloting a craft called Spaceship One soared to an altitude of just above 62 miles, 100 kilometers, which is considered the definition of where space begins. And that suborbital space flight, having taken place within a span of 2 weeks, actually much less than that, qualifies Burt Rutan, designer of the Spaceship One, and his team as the winners of the X Prize, which is a $10 million prize created by my friend Peter Diamandis and some of his colleagues to spur innovation in space flight systems that may lead to the day when any of us could buy a ticket and have the experience that up to now only astronauts and cosmonauts have had. I was able to watch the flight only because my conventional flight, seemingly by comparison, very conventional means of transportation on a jet airplane down here was postponed. And so while I was in the airport, I was standing there glued to the monitor watching CNN and saw this take place this morning. And I found myself, not only on this flight, but the other flights that have led up to this, far more emotionally involved with this whole thing than I thought I was going to be. Now, I've known about the X Prize, like many of you, since it was first announced 8 years ago, and knew that if and when somebody was able to pull this off, that it was going to be significant. It was at least going to have some symbolic meaning as the beginning of a new era in which private individuals could create space programs without government. What I didn't realize was the emotional impact that it would have on me when it actually occurred. And I think to try and put words to it, it was like the difference between seeing some sort of military assault, if you could imagine a military assault on Mount Everest, versus the guy that climbed Mount Everest all by himself back in I think it was the early 1980s, Reinhold Messner. Just an astonishing feat of one human being making it up to the top of Everest, and then he did it again without oxygen and later on. But there was something about the sight of Spaceship One with its sole occupant, knowing that this spacecraft had been created by a team of something like 20 people for a budget of something like $25 million. And this person is 1 minute, he's on the ground, he's like you and me. The next minute, he's in space. And it was almost a magical feeling that this was not an experience. I mean, when we went to the moon on Apollo, it was a whole country going to the moon. It was a sense we were representing all of mankind going to the moon. It was something that was an event on a cultural level. This was an event that was much more on the level of an individual, and I found it very moving. When I look back on Apollo, and I think about the way that made such a difference in my life, because when I was 13, the summer I turned 13 was when Armstrong and Aldrin landed on the moon in that first moon landing. And then it was such a part of my growing up. It was such a driving force for me to study space science, to dream of being an astronaut, and then eventually a path that I never did anticipate, never could have anticipated, which was to become a journalist and an author, to tell the story of space exploration. What an impact that made on me. And part of it was that it lit a fire in me to want to go, to want to experience that myself, to believe in the inherent value of space exploration as a human experience and also as something that benefits our society. Back then, going to the moon or even going into Earth orbit